part of Men's Health Month is talking about suicide. It's the leading cause of death for men under the age of 50. And as a person who's probably sat in the room with many men who are considering not being alive tomorrow, we really wanted to get an understanding of what it is that men are actually facing today. Like, what are the statistics? How bad is it? And then, going from there, what's the language that people who are can listen for that might be an indicator that they should be concerned about this? And then what's language that they can use to best support someone who might say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this thing." But let's start with the statistics. Like, how bad is it?
Yeah. Well, the reality is men, when you think of this concept of suicide or death by suicide or suicide attempt, we know that men account for about 79 to 80%. So when you look at the amount of people that we are losing to suicide, 79 to 80% of those are men. And so that alone is a statistic that we should be paying attention to, and we should be looking at what are the strategies to reduce suffering in men. And before we keep talking about this as, a statistic, do you mind if I just say one kind of qualifying fact?
Please.
Okay. So I think one of the things that is there is a lot of misinformation around is that suicidal thoughts or the behavior of suicide is like a conscious choice, or that somebody is doing this, or maybe they're doing it to hurt others, or like there's a lot of different misinformation out there. And so I do just want to say before we dive into a broader conversation is that suicidal thoughts or thoughts of self-harm, they are a symptom. They are a symptom of a medical condition. And so when we think about the category of mental health, depression is a mental health concern, right? Or we could say it's a mental illness, but I like to say it's a mental health concern because depression is just a sign that your neurobiological responses to life are overwhelmed. And so you can reach a place where you're at capacity, where like your sadness or your suffering is at capacity. And then you generate thoughts like self harm or suicidal thoughts. And so that's kind of the first entry point that I have with individuals is normalizing that what they're going through does not mean that they're crazy or that these thoughts are not a moral failure or a sign that something is wrong with them. Because I do think it can be very overwhelming when somebody is experiencing thoughts of self harm or suicide and they may have their own co-founding guilt, shame layers that show up.
I have a quick question. So, when it comes to men's suicide, why, like, what do you think is at the root of it? Is it lack of purpose? Is it financial stuff? Is it like deep mental health that just goes untreated? Like, what have you found to be the common factors?
Well, when we have these broader conversations, right, we're looking at statistics. Anytime we're looking at statistics, we're looking at what has been measured and the group that responded. So the question of why are men at such a high risk is going to depend on the data and who's responding. And so it just data is wonderful. And yes, that's what we go to for evidence-based practice, but also it's not perfect. It's not all encompassing. So I'm just saying I think we're missing there are people who are not represented in the data. But what we know is that men are least likely to ask for help when you look at men versus women. There's also a lot of misinformation around if you ask for help, you're weak, or some of these cultural factors where individuals may not even believe that mental illness or mental health are things that you can work on. And so I think that risk factor for isolation just is so profound. And we know that isolation fuels depression. And so I think that is a large challenge. Absolutely. You asked about stressors, like, is this related to loss or financial issues or something like that? I do think if you are someone who has not historically had to build resilience or had small stressors in your life, and now you have something large, we know that that can be a risk factor. So a life change that you're not anticipating that leads to economic stressors or a loss of relationship, whether that's to death or divorce or otherwise, those can definitely increase that risk of suicidal behaviors in men. And then men are more likely to choose lethal means. So once they've made up their mind that they're going to make an attempt, typically it's a more lethal approach, and so then there is a higher rate of completion.
So for everyone who listens, like, lethal means is like a really big deal to discuss, because when you're sitting with someone who you might think has thoughts of ending their life, lethal means is a definition for knowing that they have the means of some degree to end their life in their immediate environment, like a gun or pills or a rope. And so, like, the lethal means thing is a really interesting conversation for harm reduction. We'll circle back to that.
Yes, yes. And that's, one of the places that we can go with our conversation. How do we make a difference? Why are these conversations important? And one of the reasons is because we know that when you talk about suicide, you increase people's protective factors. You have the opportunity. And you can also shift individuals out of their emotional part of their brain into their rational cognitive thinking part of their brain. And that allows us to make more intentional choices.
How do you do that? Oh, sorry, Doug, go ahead.
Well, I think it's important to I would like to talk about like context around suicidal thoughts and ideation, because there's been situations in my life, whether it's people that I've known or just in when I've had bad states when I was younger, it's like, oh, I should just kill myself. They weren't real, but it was just because of my state at that time was so bad. You just have these quick thoughts. And then I've also experienced people using thoughts of suicide as a means to gain attention
Mhm.
and for people to come rescue them. So I guess this comes into, as we're talking about how people can get help, like how do we know what's real and what's not with this stuff?
Yeah. So the most important response is that you believe someone no matter what. So, especially as a friend. So there's different categories of relationships. If you're a friend, if it's a family member versus a clinician. And so if you're a friend, it's not a friend's job to rescue someone or do therapy, but it could be a friend's job to say, that's scary. Are you okay? Who are you talking to about this? Like, who's in your life? How can I connect you with resources? There's amazing free resources in the United States. We have the crisis text line that you can text. You don't have to be suicidal. If you're just in a crisis and you don't know who to talk to, it's free and it's 24/7 and you're connected to humans, it's not just an AI driven platform. Um, and then that number is just 6 digits, 741 741. So you can text that 24/7. I make sure all my college students have that. Um, and then the other piece is, like, as family, that can be really fatiguing. So, especially if you have a family member where suicidal statements or suicide threatening behaviors have become a part of someone's maladaptive responses to life, but there is an underlying need that is not met. So I think that is also really important that we don't lose sight of the person attached to the behaviors or the statements. And as clinicians, it's our job to keep people safe and healthy. And so, depending on your setting, like when I was in an inpatient setting, the conversations that we had around suicidality were much different than in the outpatient setting because I knew they were safe and I could see them the next day. They were in a controlled environment, right? Versus outpatient, it might be a different level of intensity for how we're going to go after those thoughts and feelings. And sometimes we might be saying, hey, I actually want you to go inpatient so we can deal with this.
Yeah. Do you think, because this kind of goes back to what you opened up with, which is, the belief that someone is being selfish, someone is using this as a device, or that they're doing this to hurt someone or whatever. It's like, I can understand, as a person who's survived an attempt himself, and as a person who's witnessed losing friends to it, and then I've also witnessed what looks like the behavior of, attention seeking. But there's a sense for people who really have no experience with this whatsoever, which is, well, I know how bad my life has been. I know the worst days of my life, and I never ever considered saying or doing any of these things. So how selfish must that person be to say such a thing? And and if you think of it from that perspective, it's somewhat of an appropriate assumption. However, the much more accurate perspective to take is, God, I've had the worst day of my life, and I never thought of that. How bad must it be for this individual? I must have no understanding of the emotional experience of this individual, and I should give them grace and benefit of the doubt that I'm probably not going to be able to support this person the best that they need. Who is that person? Yeah. What's Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, Adam, that's, my life motto is never worry alone.
Mm,
And so I think so many people hold stuff on their own, or they're like, "Oh, don't know what to do about that." That's tough for them, or like, "I don't know." But like that's a worry. And so if you are someone who's living with a worry, and a worry doesn't have to be like, am I gonna live tomorrow? Can I take on today? Like, where is my next meal coming from? Like, not necessarily that level worry, but just like something that's not sitting well with you. If you get in a habit of talking to a trusted person, like the right person, the right place, um, you can develop this capacity for including people in your life, and it becomes less isolating. And so I think, to your point, so many people hear things and or say things, and they don't know what to do with it, and so they're just like, "That's not for me,"
yeah.
right? And they just walk away, and or they're just like, "Hope you figure it out." Like, that sounds tough. Yeah, it's too big. I'm not trained in that stuff, but I think if we can get to a place of knowing there are people who are trained in those things, and it's really rare that somebody just has a bad day and is suicidal, right? Typically, suicidal thoughts are something that have built over time, and there have been other symptoms. And so that is where we see, maybe it's recurrent guilt, maybe it's shame, maybe it's feeling like a failure, some an element of like, I'm not fulfilling my purpose, right? So there might be some other underlying disappointments that someone is experiencing that no one knows about.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that is the misinformation that we have right now around mental health promotion. Um, and the importance of having real conversations around, how are we actually doing? Because most people are actually suffering in some way. And I don't mean that in like, we're all suffering, life is so hard. But it's like nobody actually has it all together. But then you see like the highlight reels on social media, or the whatever you want to call it. And people are going to interpret that as like, I'm not enough. How do I get to that next level? How do I keep up? And that just might all be compiling in a way that then leads to bigger symptoms like self-harm or suicide.
Have you found that most people that come in for help, like specifically men for suicide, are they forced in there by a family member, or is it voluntary?
Man, that is a really good question, actually. I would love to look up the data for that. I think I wanna look up the data for that. I would say in my experience, it's 50-50. So sometimes there are men who, um, they they know that they're at capacity, and they want to show up for their family. I think that men who are connected with themselves and others, and they're asking for help. But then there are others, and this is kind of where I think we see the substance use piece, where they have leaned on substances to self medicate. That's no longer meeting a need, and now that has cost them something. Whether that's financial or relationships in their family, and that has led to treatment. Um, and then I would say, for those who do survive attempts, that's the other kind of entry point that I've seen and interacted with.
So, one of the reasons why Doug and I do this show specifically for men is that Doug and I have a very strong belief that male depression and female depression are not exactly the same thing.
No, how could they be?
Right. And so when we're talking about the 80% of suicides that successfully suicide every year being men, what language can people use that's different that they don't know? Because the majority of the psychology language and the emotional support language is directed towards that which would be best supported for women. And I think that's because mostly women are the ones who are asking for help. So most of the programming is built around those who ask for help the most. What language would be more successful for that, for the man in your life who you are concerned about?
Well, I actually would say, what do you think resonated with you? Or what were the things that allowed
So
you?
I love that you asked that question. Thank you so much. The thing that resonate I'll tell you what didn't resonate with me. didn't resonate with me was the overvalidation of my experience. At a certain point, I was done being told there's nothing wrong with me, because at a certain point, I was like, if there's nothing wrong with me, that's a big problem.
Guys, something's not working about this.
Right? Like, and the idea that, like, I don't want to have one more person give me permission to feel what I'm feeling. I'm not asking for your permission to feel what I'm feeling right now. I'm asking for anyone to give me the instructions to build agency and competence to move out of here. That's what I want. And I want evidence that it exists. That's what I want. And so from my perspective, what I really believe relates with men is giving them a sense that there's a blueprint to change their situation, an quote unquote, an instruction manual that exists, and examples of those who have followed it and survived. It's like, I think that's why men like, for me, it's like, as much as I want to, dislike the person, at a certain point, like, I want to listen to Goggins. Like, at a certain point, I want to hear somebody say, like, dude, yeah, your life sucks. And what are you going to do about it if nothing changes? Like, what are you going to do? How are you going to have the life you want if nothing around you changes? What do you want to build in yourself that you could take charge of and move yourself forward? It's like, that's the kind of, at a certain point, like, I need Arnold in my corner, right? I need Rocky in my corner. I need that dude that's going to be like, dude, get up, get up.
Yeah, and I think that's why modern therapy, at least in my opinion, just in some ways doesn't work for men.
Right.
And the reason is, like, you could go to a therapist and they could just pamper you and just like Adam said, over validate your problems, not give you any real solution, and then you're kind of stuck in the same place. Except now maybe you're taking less responsibility for your role in whatever situation you're in, because a therapist is now validating how bad your life is.
Yeah.
And I think that just traps men. They feel powerless. I think men need to be physical, not like in a violent way. I think they need to process things by exercise, moving their body, being around other like-minded men. They don't need to be, sitting on a couch and just crying about their life. I mean, I think there's a place for that for certain situations, but you do that long enough, you're going to feel powerless.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I think two things are interesting in this is that we are lacking in, I know there are models and there are different types of providers who do specialize in treating specific populations, right? So, like men who specialize in helping men in mental health, which is meaningful. Like, you need to be, like, I'm not an expert in treating men because I'm not a man, but I've had good outcomes in working with men in, mental health care, and supporting them achieving their goals. But to your point, Adam, I experienced that, realistically with some high school, college students, and learning, like, I had to learn quickly, like, they don't need me to validate this. They don't need me to, like, be this maternal figure. They need me to be like, "What are you doing?" Like,
Yes.
"W what's the plan?" Like, "Okay, sure, let's keep repeating what you're doing. I'm sure it's going to work out just fine." And of course, I'm saying that only when I have a therapeutic relationship. But the reality is, I think once you learn someone's personality, their motivating factors, then you have to build their life in a way that is meaningful to them. And you have to give them agency. The other piece is you have to have physical activity. So I think you look at the way the world is currently structured, and a lot of young boys, might not be growing up playing, being physical. I think there's some of that pendulum swift shifting with, like, millennial parents. But I do think when we think about validating a man's experience, number one, finding out what's important to them, but then also finding out, like, how are you living your day? Like, are you just waking up, sitting, moving, and then like sitting in a car or on public transport, right? And then you sit at your job and then you go home and you sit. Like, that could be a really miserable experience. Where are you infusing joy, novelty, growth, like literal physical growth? I think it's really meaningful.
I
I think
think
it's one of
that
the reasons
oh god,
why
you got it.
I think it's one of the reasons why so many young men are gravitate towards Jordan Peterson, because he speaks to that specifically, which is like, no, the thing is that there's a lot wrong, and you could be so much more than you are right now. That's why you're upset. Upset because you're a witness to the fact that there's so much more to you that you could be and you're not it. And it's like, oh, that's great. I'm so glad to hear that. In fact, I'm not everything I could be, and you're just great the way you are. No, wrong. You could be so much more than you are. And that, I think young men really love hearing that. They love hearing that, like, there's a growth potential that if you were to put forth the effort and you were to physically take on the burden and the struggle of this and this effort, you could grow and expand into somebody that you, if you saw them today, be like, that's who I want to be.
Well, I think expanding on this idea and kind of getting how it relates to like men and asking for help is what I found is that when you're in a low place and you feel like crap about yourself and you feel like a failure, you're depressed or whatever, like the thought of thinking you can get better is so overwhelming. You don't know what to do. You don't know the next first step. Then you pull up social media and like you said earlier, Elizabeth, you're seeing the wins, you're seeing the highlight reels. And then as it relates to asking for help, it's like, wait, now there's so much that's already wrong with me. Now I have to actually tell that to somebody. Now I have to actually admit there's something else in my life that's not perfect. So if there's a guy listening to this and they they feel like they're on that trajectory down towards some of the stuff we're talking about, what can they do? And then as a follow-up question that I'd love for you to cover, should they the immediate thing to be to ask for help if you have thoughts, or does it have to get to the point where you have like a plan? Like, I mean, I'm interested. Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Sorry. Yeah, no, we're not waiting until there's a plan. The To anyone listening that might be like, "Okay, I don't have the energy to be challenged. Are you kidding me? Like, just going through my day is hard right now." And or like my mental capacity is at its limit. I do think that's where having a trained professional, like a therapist, a counselor, a psychiatrist, a peer counselor, there's coaches, there's so many different ways that you could connect with someone. I think that is a really great place to start because when we're thinking about someone who is living with depression, some days are going to be better than others. And so what's the plan, right? Like what are the strategies that you're trying? There's some really cool theories around behavior activation. So when we talk about treatment for mental health conditions, so you've got cognitive behavioral therapy, right? So the relationship between your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. You don't get to choose your feelings. And so I think that's where there's a lot of validation where therapists are like, this is not your fault. The way that you're feeling is because of meaningful things. Okay, great. Fact. You can't choose your feelings. Then you have an option. Are you going to choose your thoughts or your behaviors? And for some people, spending more time in their brain is not a good idea. The thoughts aren't helpful and we need to get out of there. That's where behavior can be super powerful. And behavior can look like just getting up and going and filling a water bottle. Behavior can look like walking your dog if you have a dog. But so behavior, and I think that's really important when you sit down with someone who is trained, where you can say whatever it is that is in there for you and start to piece together a plan that feels tolerable. But to Adam's point, you get to a place where it's like, what else? What next? Like you start to see the belief or you start to have some wins. And so then you're like, all right, is this it? Like, is it going to get much better than this? And it's like, yeah, actually here, there's options and you get to choose what direction it goes.
Do you think that DBT over CBT is more relatable for men than in regards to this situation?
I see that they both resonate. So CBT is that cognitive behavioral therapy, and then DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy. The nice thing about DBT is it has a lot of skills. So DBT is a skills-based model, and there are also a lot of groups. And so if you are looking for something like a modality or type of treatment, look up dialectical behavioral therapy in your area. There's also some virtual options. I do think that DBT is a great place to start, Adam, if you're looking at what do I do? Like, what
Yeah.
give me some skills to try?
Yeah, I really believe DBT saved my my life in regards to my ability to build distress tolerance and emotional regulation as a man in the world. And so for any guys out there, like I know talk therapy is probably what you think of when you think of getting help. DBT is very much for that guy who like wants a system to build and wants to expand their capacity to tolerate the difficult things in life and in those moments act in the best interest of their future. Like that's DBT is like nuts and bolts getting into it and building a system for your life. And if you can do it in a men's group, it's like building an engine for your brain with a bunch of dudes. Like it's the
Yeah.
coolest work ever.
So, yeah, and like Marsha Linehan, who is the founder of DBT, the premise is to build a life worth living, right? So her whole goal was to flip the model. Like, let's just stop talking about why you want to die or like why you're so sad, and let's get back to living. And so I like your reframe of that. Like, no, you're building an engine. You're piecing together the way
Yeah.
that we're going to move through. That's cool.
That's the way that's the way that I always viewed it. It's like, dude, we're gonna go work on this engine today. I got a lot of work to do.
Elizabeth, if we could create like a framework for people to recover from the depths of the severe mental health issues we're talking about, like outside of things like DBT, we talked about physical fitness community. Like if you were to put together, like, all right, these are the 5 non-negotiables, like everybody should do every week. Like, what does that framework look like?
Yeah. I get 5.
10.
Okay. Um, so I would say, the first thing is you've got to know who are your people you can talk to on a bad day. Like, who are the people that if you reached out and you're like, hey, I need to talk to you about something, or um, I just need to know you're there. I don't know what that looks like, but um, for different people, it's different things. They don't necessarily need to have a long conversation, but they need to get that response that it's like, yep, in it with you. Or like, yeah, reach out if you need me. Right. So you have to have consistent, meaningful connection. And that can be in person or virtual. Um, Ideally in person. If we're talking like a weekly routine, like who is it that you are connecting with? There's some really cool social data around hugs as well. Like some people might be like, don't touch me. But there's actually some really therapeutic things about just like a hug. And so that's where like an in-person connection can be really therapeutic for more ways than just like
This is
being,
where the theory of third place shows up also, right? The theory of that people who are emotionally well have a third place. It's if not at home, they're not at work, that's where they'll be.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, and we've lost that over time, especially in America. So, we don't have like a universal cultural experience or universal shared faith within or spirituality. And that's really what you see in other generations where and it doesn't necessarily have to be rooted in like culture, faith, but it's belonging. And so you see belonging when you start talking about those types of things. And that's where I think pickleball has been huge for people finding a third place. Also mahjong, that's not necessarily like a men thing, but like that's making a comeback and it's creating, I haven't learned it yet, but I think it's coming
So
for me.
we have belonging as number 1.
Belonging, so social connection. You have to have meaning. What are you doing? Like, how are you spending your time? Because if all you're doing is working at a job for a paycheck, what does that mean? Like, why? What is the purpose? What is the value add? Now, that doesn't mean that you have to quit your job. It doesn't mean that your job has to be your meaning. But you have to feel connected to yourself in a way that is meaningful. And I think many people followed a path, right? I did the thing, got the job, or I got the relationship, I'm doing the thing, have the family. Where are you? Like, what is your meaning? What is your value in your current life? And how are you connecting with that consistently? Um,
Is meaning the same as future orientation? Are they connected?
they're connected, but it's not the same. So, meaning is like, for me, like this podcast has meaning and value in my life. Like, it is a through line. Like, my meaning and value is to bring awareness to mental health and mental health promotion. And I would love for people not to take their own life. Like, that is a life goal. To make a dent in this statistic because I've lost people I love to suicide. And so it's very profoundly impactful for me. But being future oriented is, what are you looking forward to? So I think that's a sign of mental capacity and mental health. So when you're connected to yourself and others and you have purpose, there should be things in the future that you're looking forward to. That's actually a warning sign. So Doug, to your statement earlier, when should we tell people to ask for help? Like, do we wait until there's a plan? Absolutely not. Right? Like if you see people start falling off of some of the things that they were doing, or they're no longer like connected to or excited about stuff in the future, and there's a change in their behavior in that way, I would say that is when we would want to start asking more specific questions about if they're okay.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up is I've had this guy, Dr. Ethan Cross, on, who's a brilliant researcher out of the University of Michigan who studies the inner voice and chatter and negative thoughts. And he made a point on my podcast to say that the reason we have these negative thoughts sometimes is to protect ourselves from doing them. He brought up this example of how he was in a group exercise class. I think it was like maybe an F45 or something to that effect. And he was like, oh my God, what would happen if I dropped this 30-pound dumbbell in this woman's face? And he said
Yeah.
a lot
Well,
of people would find shame around that. But what he was saying, what he knows about the mind is it's telling him that because it's warning him of the dangers of doing something like that. And so, I mean, obviously, yeah, you don't want to wait until you have a plan to ask for help. You want to do it as soon as you can. That being said, like, I know we've all had bad days. There's a lot of people who have really dark thoughts on their bad days that tend to go away the next day. So how can people, I guess, separate? Like, how do they know whether it's just a bad day and they had like some dark thoughts that just came and went versus like the thoughts that are persistently there? Like, how does somebody know?
yeah. But I think that's the importance of knowing that these are things that are happening and you can talk about them. And so if you have a person in your life that you can say, man, I'm I'm really wondering like what's my purpose? Like today today I had this thought, like, is do I even need to be here? Like what's the point of me being here? Right. And I think that some individuals can sit in that and it can be a friend conversation and that can be enough to get it into that cognitive space of like, yeah, today was just a bad day. That was weird. And the thought came and it went. For anyone who's lived with suicidal thoughts, like chronic suicidal thoughts, they know. And again, I think that's where you have to have a trained professional. So like for me, if I'm sitting with one of my patients and we're talking about it, what I need to know is like, how long is it around? How much credit are you giving these thoughts? And how hard is it for you to ignore them or choose another thought? Because for some people, actually what they learn is how to live with chronic suicidal thoughts, but they have specific skills and behaviors that they know they are supposed to choose. And they know their warning signs when they're not choosing them. And they know the safe people that they can go to when it's too much.
Well, I guess to maybe quickly separate what I was saying, when I'm saying ask for help, I mean, obviously it's important to talk to somebody. I'm saying like, when is it that you go to like a crisis hotline?
Yeah.
You go check yourself in. That's what I was kind of saying. Cause if somebody's like, oh, I just had a bad day, does that
Yeah.
really justify them checking themselves into a psychiatric hospital? Probably not, right?
Well, sure. I don't think so. I think, no, not every negative thought or fleeting question is an emergency. But what I would say is if there is a layered experience of like you're feeling isolated and not connected to others, and those thoughts are coming more increasingly or they're harder to ignore, you should reach out to a professional. That's also, I think, the beauty of things like the crisis text line or the suicide prevention lifeline, like 988. That's a free resource that you can call or text. Those are people that you could have these conversations with and be like, "I don't really know." And they're trained to sit in that conversation with you.
Yeah, that's also where the topic of lethal means comes in. It's like, if you're having these thoughts and you have lethal means, like you own a gun, you have pills, you have something like that, it's like, call one of these hotlines. They're anonymous. Call them, talk to somebody, and figure out where you are. There's, it. I always, one of my good friends, Paul DeGelder, who lost a friend to suicide, who was a veteran, said there's there's always greater solutions that exist in tomorrow than not making it to tomorrow. And it's like, we'll call someone and find out what those solutions might be. All you got to do is listen to them.
Doug, I really appreciate your like kind of teasing apart this normal human experience where we all have positive and negative thoughts and feelings and trying to discern like, but when does it become too much? And so I think that's also knowing your risk factors versus your protective factors. And I think when we look at this category of men, there's so many men who are having these thoughts and feelings longer and in isolation. I think that's what stacks up the risk factors. Because by the time men are starting to talk about things, it might have been around longer. Right, they
Yeah, and
might
I
have
Further
been,
along in a crisis than the average woman who brings it
yeah.
up. Yeah.
yeah, and I think it's a lot of this stems from my own personal experience. I mean, I've lost a lot of people to addiction and suicide. I lost one of my best childhood friends, like
Right.
3 months ago to suicide. And it's a very it hits home with me, and I think that men, I've been like reading a lot more that like when a male role model leaves a man's life, their mental health is much more likely to suffer. If a man gets divorced, they're much more likely to suffer. I also I look at our system now, and I'm a fan of healthcare for everyone, so to speak, socialized medicine. What I am a fan of is universal psychiatric care because I think one of the things that holds people back from getting help is they can't afford it. They can't afford a $10,000 hospital stay if they're in there for a week or whatever. And a lot of these mental health facilities, they kick you out after like a week. There's no long-term care for these people. And I've seen it with people that I've worked with, friends of friends and stuff. And then on the other side of that, with like language around friends, because I've lost people to suicide, when people are like, "Oh, I'm just gonna kill myself," I'm like, "Okay, well, I'm gonna go call I'm gonna call crisis hotline," and then they're like, "No, no, no, don't do that." And then I feel like I'm being manipulated. You know what I mean? Or being, because people do that. As much as these thoughts are serious, I think it's also a way that people manipulate other people to give them attention.
Doug, it's when you bring that up, I was recently rewatching a show from the '90s called, or maybe it was early 2000s, called Gilmore Girls. It's actually a great show,
Part of
and
it.
there's like suicide jokes in that, and there's suicide jokes in Dawson's Creek, which we also rewatched. And it's like this was a language that they made. This was typically you hear this much more from the male characters in the show. The American was like, oh, well, maybe I'll just go kill myself. It's like, she turned me down for a date, and it's like it created this idea that that's just something men say, right? And it's like to your point, it's like, oh, well, no, go call the crisis hotline. No, 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 don't do that. It's like,
Then
well, hang
don't.
on a second. We created for a while. I know in my generation growing up, Doug probably the same time. Like, dude, guys used to joke about this all the time to the point where it normalized the language to where if you actually were in crisis, it'd be like, wait, you're actually struggling with this, dude? Like, really? To where there was almost a shame attached to it. And I think that that's where we have part of the problem. Um, I also there was an interesting piece of data that came out that as the blue collar middle class trade jobs were outsourced to other countries, you saw a remarkable increase in mental health struggles in men and suicidality in men. It's like men lost their purpose and their ability to demonstrate competence to a group. And but let's get back to your list.
Wait, I'm coming back to my list, but I do want to circle back to this statement of how do you replace those words? So I know it's not our job to like teach our friends how to talk, but I do think that there is a very real like if you have somebody who's using that as a joking response and then you are responding in an intentional way and saying, "Wait, do we need to like connect you with someone? Should we call a hotline?" Like that's the serious thing that you're saying. For me, I think it's really important to say back to someone like if you're just having, a difficult day or whatever, can you try and say something else? Because I'm going to believe you. That's what I say to my patients. I'm going to believe you. If you tell me that you're going to hurt yourself or you want to die, we're going to respond in a meaningful way. Like, we're not joking around with that. You can say so many other things. Let's find something else that you can say so that, because if you say you want to die, I'm going to listen And so I think that that's like a stance that I wish more people took, because it is not a joke. And the other thing is, I do think people who say those things sometimes are actually being serious, and they are seeing like what's the response that's going to happen. And that's where I just think it's not a friend's job to be the therapist, but it is a friend's job to care. And so sometimes we're not going to know, and we can do everything right, right? Like, we can respond in kind ways, we can give resources, we can connect, we can support. Sometimes we're going to do everything right, and people are still going to act on those thoughts or behaviors, but that doesn't mean we don't try, you know?
I think
Should
it's
we
that.
set boundaries though? Like if somebody continues to do it and you offer help and they continue, I mean, because a lot of times that can be very draining, and especially if you're somebody that
Yes.
like it's like wants the best for someone, it can be exhausting time after time again to give somebody resources to be there for them.
Yes.
And then
I
you
think that that's a
you end up
boundary.
risking your own mental health. You know what I
You
mean?
have to protect your own capacity and your own peace. I think that's the difference of knowing what is the relationship. But even within a family system, there are some great books and resources. DBT skills are also a really helpful thing to have in a relationship like that with someone, so that you know how to protect your own peace. That's where there's an entire curriculum under the DBT model for families. How do you live with someone who might have chronic suicidal behaviors? Um, there's a book, I don't know how much it's recommended currently, but it's called Stop Walking on Eggshells.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And so it's like, I do think it has some helpful, it's like an entry point. I think that can be helpful. Um, if people don't know where to start, if you are interacting with someone and you're like, I think this is a behavior seeking statement. But again, I just don't think we should ever be dismissive of it, because we don't know.
I like what you said though, because I think it's in regards to like how men can respond to other men. It's very specific and it's very action oriented, which is like if you say that, bro, I'm gonna take it seriously. Just so you know.
Yeah, just
That
wherever you're at in that relationship, like, that's not
it,
funny.
it's such a good response from a male perspective, which is like I'm not here to understand your emotions, and I don't want to, but I care about you. So you say that stuff to me, and I'm gonna take it seriously.
Yes.
Right? Like, and I think for men, like that's that's great. Like that's the best response ever. It's like if it were me, I was like, dude, this taste sucks, man. I'm gonna fucking kill myself. And my buddy goes, hey, Adam, listen to me. You say that stuff around me, and I'm gonna take it seriously. Be like, all right, man, I got you. Trust me, I wasn't serious. And if
Yeah,
I
I was
was,
serious.
yeah, like
Yeah.
that's a really good directive for men.
Yeah, find something else to say.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
back to my list.
yes.
Physical activity, find something that is meaningful to you as a man. I do think that, like, team sports, and I don't mean like you've gotta sign up for a rec league or whatever, but, like, what does that look like? Are you playing basketball? Are you playing pickleball? Are you doing I don't know, but find something, whether it's like weight training, marathon training, walking, biking, cycling, like, it could be anything. Swimming. I actually have seen swimming be really therapeutic for some men who are trying to figure out a place to start for getting back into physical stuff. Um, Sleep. So if you're not sleeping, your brain is not going to have the capacity that it needs. And so I really, really strongly encourage people to get 7 hours of sleep consecutively at night. Stop napping. Just sleep at night. So I think that's really, like, if I'm saying we're going to string together some health behaviors for a week, you need to be connecting with at least one other person who you can actually meaningfully connect with. Um, you need to be doing something physical consistently, like, find something that's meaningful to you. You've got to have purpose. What the heck are you doing? Right? Like, not why are you doing it, but like, what are you doing and how are you feeling connected to your life right now? Um, and then that element of sleep. We can like stack all the other things on there, but I think you get enough noise in life of like, eat healthy, blah, 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 do all the things. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, if you want to build a healthy man who can show up for himself and others, he has to know what he's showing up for and who he is. And so I think in our culture, to your point, if you lose a man in your life that has been a role model or somebody that you felt like validated those things in you, that can be really destabilizing. So if you are a man in a position to mentor, maybe that's some of your purpose. Like, maybe you find someone that you can invest in. Mentorship is a really important part of long term mental capacity. And when we talk about recovery, we know there's a lot of protective factors in mentorship. So I think that's my list. I don't know how many
Yeah,
I'm thinking, but
belonging, meaning, right? Physical activity, you have purpose, sleep, and, I think that that's a phenomenal list. I mean, what I really liked about what you said, we can wrap it up on this one because it's so good, is like, if you're a man, you need to know what you're showing up for.
yeah, who are you and what are you showing up for?
What are you showing up for? Why do you matter, and what do you matter to? Right? Like, that is such an important identifying factor of what it is to be a man in the world. Like, why would you struggle and who would you struggle for?
Yeah,
Like,
and I would just say to that, like, we need you. I'm not positioning those questions because I don't think that there is value. I'm positioning them because I think the value comes from a man answering that for himself and then building the confidence and living in that purpose. Men living in their purpose feel different.
Well, and I think what I also got out of what you said is that's why I think it's important for men to compete, like especially when they're kids, so they can deal with loss. They can deal with what it's like to win, to struggle, being consistent, showing up. And it doesn't have to be like you're the captain of the varsity football team, but it could be like, trying out for a play, trying out for, a concert or something like that. Like find something where you have to compete because the reality is that's life. Like life is sales, competitiveness, ups and it's just the way it is. Unfortunately, I had this guy Patrick Bet David on my podcast, who I really admire, and he gave a parenting tip that has stuck with me. And we were talking about parenting, and he was saying that he wants his kids to negotiate with him. He teaches his kids negotiation. He said, when my daughter asks me for something and I say no, he's like, I want her to come back and give me a reason to say yes, because that's a life skill that people need. I want her to come up with a solution to kind of challenge me. So I guess to sum all that up, like I think competitiveness and finding a way to get comfortable with dealing with losing in life, I think is a great skill for building resilience and building fortitude. I mean, I love this combo. I think this is a great place for us to kind of end because we just kind of gave the solution in a way, or a solution to some of these problems. So we appreciate you coming on. Adam, you got anything to add?
yeah,
Thanks.
before we end, Elizabeth, you listed off a few resources, but I'd like to exist in one, audio spot. What are
Okay.
your top resources that any person can reach out to if they're feeling the need to reach out?
So in the United States, we have a few free resources that are digital. So one is the crisis text line, and you can text the word life, LIFE, to 741 741. You're immediately connected with a crisis counselor. The other is the suicide prevention lifeline. That number is 988. You can call or text. They're free and they're 24/7.
And then, where can people find out more about you?
At Winings Wellness. So we are located in Florida, and we provide preventative mental health care to children, adults, and families. And we'll be doing it as long as
Yeah. So
we're
if
open.
you are in the area and you, like me, are impressed by Dr. Elizabeth Winings and you'd like to know more about what she does in her area, please go to her website, find out more about her. She's a really remarkable person. She's really trying to change the landscape of how we treat mental health from every aspect of lifestyle. So not just like what we think about and how we respond to our thoughts, but how we feel ourselves, how we sleep, how we interact with other people. She's really a pioneer in the space, and honored to call her a friend. Honored to call her one of my people that I would call when I have a hard day.
Yep, here for you. And thanks for having me, guys. It's important work.
Peace.